Hey guys, it's Ryan. In this video, I'm gonna be going over different ways you can combine the knit stitch and the purl stitch. So hopefully by now you know how to knit and purl. In this video, I'm gonna go over a couple different ways that you can combine the two methods to create different textures, different types of stitching and fabric. I'm gonna be using slightly smaller knitting needles than I've used before. These are an 8. I'm using them just to make kind of a tighter fabric so we can see the differences in the patterns a little easier. But you can use any size you want, anything that you're comfortable with, and you can use any type of yarn, obviously. So let's get started. There are just a couple basic ways to combine knitting and purling. In my last video, I went over just the basics of knitting and purling, and you end up with a stitch that looks like this. This is called a garter stitch. It's just bumpy and squiggly on both sides of the fabric, and you're gonna end up with this if all you do is the knit stitch or the purl stitch. So this is just straight up knitting, knitting, knitting on both sides, or purling, purling, purling on both sides as well. So when you combine knitting and purling, you can end up with a lot of different types of fabric. This first one that I'm going to go over is the stockinette stitch. It's very common. It's probably one of the most common stitches you'll see in knitting. It's actually what you'll see in most fabrics for the clothes you wear every day. So like a t-shirt, anything like that is going to be using this type of stitch. It's very flat on one side and then very bumpy on the other side. To do this stitch, the rule is basically to knit all the knits and to purl all the purls. And I'm going to explain what that means. Basically, when you knit something, this is called a knit stitch. When there's no loops or bumps, it's just coming straight out at you and it's very flat. This is called the knit side, and then on this side is going to be called the purl side. So it's bumpy, there's a lot of different loops. This is going to be the side that you'll purl, and then this is going to be the side that you knit. So the rule for this is just to knit the knits and then purl the purls. You can differentiate between the two by thinking of an actual purl. It's round, and then on this purl side of the fabric, it's going to be round and bumpy like a purl. So this first row is the knit row, the knit side. So you're going to want to knit it. And you might notice that I'm actually speed knitting. And if you don't know how to speed knit already, feel free to check out my speed knitting video where I'll show you how to do that. If you don't, that's fine. You can just knit however you feel comfortable doing. You're just going to want to knit this entire row. And when you're finished, you want to flip it. So now you'll be facing the bumpy side. This is going to be the side that you'll want to purl. So for every single loop, you're going to purl them. And here I'm going to be speed purling. So if you don't know how to speed purl, again, I have a tutorial that will show you how to do that. But again, you can use whatever method you're comfortable with. You just want to purl the entire row. So now that I've done that for a couple rows, you can get an idea of the type of pattern that's beginning to form. It's very flat and very nice and uniform. It's something that you would see in a t-shirt or socks or sweater, basically anything that you'd be wearing. And then on the back side, it's this very bumpy, very thick and compact purling. You may notice that your fabric will start to curl inwards as you do this more and more. Mine's already starting to curl a little bit on this corner. Ideally, what you would do to prevent that would be to do either a garter stitch on the sides or some sort of stitch to make a border that would help hold it in a flattened kind of position. The next basic stitch I'm going to show you is following the same rule of knit the knits and purl the purls, but instead of knitting all one row and purling all one row, you're going to alternate the stitch for each loop that you do. So for this first loop, so basically you're going to be going knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, and then on the next side you're going to be doing knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. Again, I'm going to be speed knitting. If you want to learn how to do that, check out the video I have for speed knitting. But I'm just going to start out with a knit stitch, and then I'm going to purl. So knit and purl, knit and purl, and I'm going to do that all throughout the rest of this row. When you've finished that row, you can turn it over and you can see that there is a pattern that's beginning to form of, here's a purl stitch, a knit stitch, a purl stitch, a knit stitch, a purl stitch, a knit stitch. And the way to tell is the purls are going to have a little loop here at the bottom of it, a little bump, and the knit stitches are going to be that smooth texture. So for the new side, you're going to want to follow the rule again, purl the purls and knit the knits, and do that for the entire row. So after doing that for a couple rows, here is what you end up with. It kind of looks like the stockinette stitch, but it's more spread out, and that's because we have these knit stitches, but then they're separated by rows of the purl stitch. And so what that does is it creates a very stretchy material. This is called ribbed stitching, so like a ribbed sweater or a ribbed hat. This is the kind of stitching that you're going to be seeing, and this is what they refer to when something is ribbed. This is something that you would see normally in like the cuffs of the sleeves of a sweater or the ankles of a sock. It's stretchy, but it still lies flat, and it's very nice. And then also you'll notice that it's the same on both sides. The last stitch I'm going to show you is called the seed stitch, and it's very similar to ribbed knitting, but you're going to be doing the opposite. So with this we did knit the knits and purl the purls, and we went knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. For seed stitching, you're going to knit the purls and purl the knits. So you're basically doing the opposite of all the roles we've been doing before. I'm going to start just with what I have here. So my first stitch is a knit stitch. So instead of knitting it, I am going to purl it. My next stitch is a purl stitch, so I'm going to knit it. And so now I'm on a little pattern here. I'm going to purl and then knit, purl, and knit. And I'm going to do that for this whole row and some more rows, and then I will show you what it ends up looking like. So now I've done a couple rows of that, and here's what you end up with. This is the seed stitch, and it's one of my favorite stitches to do because it's very tight and it's got this great texture, and then it also lies flat. You can actually see the other knitting stitches that we've been doing it's all starting to curl inwards. The seed stitch pretty much lays flat because it's the same on both sides, and there's nothing that's going to be pulling anything or making anything too tight. These are all great stitches to learn because with any project that you're doing, you will want to incorporate at least something from each one of the stitches. So I hope you learned a few things, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below. And as always, like, and subscribe if you found this to be particularly great. I'll see you next time.